I don't know how anybody ever feels confident with their picks in a video like this. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today, I'm continuing the countdown of my top 50 movies of the 2010s. I've already got a video up for picks 50 through 26, so I'd recommend checking that out before watching this video, which covers films 25 through 1. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, ranked lists, and trailer reactions. Like I said in part 1 of this video, this was an extremely hard list to put together. I really love a lot of movies from this past decade. So in case you haven't watched part 1 of this video yet, I want to reiterate a few disclaimers. A ridiculous number of movies come out every year, let alone every decade, so there are plenty of movies from the 2010s that I haven't had a chance to see yet, and obviously those movies won't be included in this list. And since I limited this list to only 50 movies, there are a lot of films, even ones I completely love, that didn't make the cut. The other thing to keep in mind is that these are my personal top movies of the decade. There are a lot of different criteria you could use to determine the best movies, but the ones on this list are included and ranked according to how much I enjoyed them. Remember, these are just my top movies, not the top movies, so be sure to post your own top movies of the 2010s in the comments below. I've already reviewed some of these movies on this channel, so if you want to check those out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below, and I'll also link some of them up in the cards as we go along. Alright, let's get the second half of this top list started. Coming in at number 25, Toy Story 4. When this movie was first announced, it was initially a bit conflicting for me. I absolutely love the Toy Story franchise. It's been a big part of my life since I was 5 years old, and so I'm kind of protective of it. I know that might sound a little weird, but what I mean by it is that I want it to remain an untainted franchise. I don't want it to become one of those franchises that everybody loves, but only if they pretend that last sequel didn't actually come out. Toy Story 3 ended the story perfectly in my opinion, so I was concerned about this one, but needlessly so. This is a fantastic movie that's certainly up to par with the other 3 films. Although I still don't think a 4th film was necessary for the story, I'm really glad we got it. Coming in at number 24, Her. I gotta be honest, I didn't expect to like this one very much. The trailers never sold me on it, and the premise sounded kinda like a bad sci-fi comedy. I mean, it's about a guy who falls in love with his phone, or more specifically, his operating system. Kinda weird at face value, but within the context of the story, it honestly doesn't feel that weird. You forget the oddity and instead get wrapped up in this very authentic sci-fi romantic drama. It's emotionally draining and brings to light some interesting questions. Thanks to Joaquin Phoenix's fantastic performance, you really feel for his character, and it's not long before Samantha feels just as real to us as she does to him. Coming in at number 23, Nightcrawler. This is one of those movies that I missed seeing in the theater, despite being really interested in it. And I wish I could have had that theatrical experience, because this is a film that just envelops you and works its way under your skin. The plot's very unique, and the story, and especially characters, are presented in a very dark and unsettling way. It's a fascinating and stylish crime drama, but also a searing critique and condemnation of how media tends to deal with tragic incidences. Coming in at number 22, Edge of Tomorrow. Remember that proclivity towards high-concept sci-fi I mentioned in the last video? Well, here's another great example. This movie has such a cool premise. Do-over, sort of pseudo-time travel movies have so much potential, and this film uses that potential to its fullest in order to craft an exciting sci-fi action film. Tom Cruise does a great job here, managing to channel everything that makes his Mission Impossible Ethan Hunt character so effective and qualified, but then reverses it to create a pretty relatable character. The extensive scene repetition due to the time loop in this film could have been a problem, but it works in a very video game kind of way and never actually feels repetitive. Coming in at number 21, Mission Impossible Fallout. Unintentional, but this is apparently the Tom Cruise action movie section of this video. I really enjoy the Mission Impossible franchise, and much like other long-running action franchises, this film turns everything up to 11, attempting to one-up the previous installment in the franchise, and it succeeds. The story here is incredibly solid, and I have to say that the action and stunts are some of the most impressive I've ever seen, this decade or any other. Tom Cruise was 55 years old when this movie came out, but you'd never guess it, and the fact that he did the vast majority of his own stunts is amazing. Coming in at number 20, Arrival. When it comes to alien movies, we have a ton of choices. There are evil aliens, there are good aliens, there are alien comedies, alien horror movies, alien action blockbusters. So, alien films have been done in just about every way imaginable, but Arrival is truly unique and approaches the topic of aliens from a very intellectual standpoint. This isn't a movie about big alien battles or the destruction of iconic landmarks. It takes a much more reserved and quiet approach, focusing on communication and linguistics. The sci-fi elements present in this film are riveting, but it also has a lot to say about how people interact with those who are different from them. Coming in at number 19, It Chapter 1. I'm a big fan of Stephen King. Living in Maine, that's kind of a given, but I've loved his books ever since I first read Cujo in the 7th grade. He's definitely my favorite author, and I think his stories are fantastic, but unfortunately, his novels don't often make the transition to film particularly well. It is a huge book and an even bigger story, so it's even more challenging for this one to make the jump to screen, as we saw in 1990 with the very underwhelming two-part It miniseries. But this movie actually does it. The adaptation of the story is really tight, the kids are excellent, and it really captures the essence of not only the novel, but of Maine itself. This is my favorite Stephen King novel adaptation in nearly 30 years. Coming in at number 18, Atomic Blonde. I love spy movies, especially ones that are unglamorized. You know, the type where it isn't all just about suave one-liners and martini drinking. I really like my spy movies gritty. I want them to be compelling action thrillers, so franchises like the Bourne and John Wick trilogies are right up my alley. And Atomic Blonde is essentially a female version of that type of movie. It's a period piece and definitely uses its 80s setting to great effect with its pop soundtrack and neon aesthetic, but the core of this movie is right up there with the other movies I mentioned. The fight choreography is fantastic, and it has this brutal authenticity to it. There's an amazing and long single-take fight sequence that occurs in this one, and the characters get beat up. You can just see the physical exhaustion, and it really makes for an immersive experience. Coming in at number 17, Annihilation. I think this might be the most A24-y movie that wasn't actually distributed by A24. This is definitely a strange movie, but for some reason, it just clicked with me. Usually esoteric sci-fi movies bug the hell out of me, but despite the fact that this movie generates way more questions than it answers and has a very odd third act, I loved it. Visually, I think it looks amazing, and the science-forward plot and extremely compelling horror-tinged mystery kept me completely engaged throughout. This is actually one that I saw with a friend of mine, and we talked about it for 4.5 hours after we got out of the theater. It definitely makes you think. Coming in at number 16, Inside Out. Of all the Pixar films in recent years, I think this was the one that I initially had the least amount of interest in. Their movies have almost always posed the same basic question. What if blank had feelings? What if toys had feelings? What if fish had feelings? What if bugs, cars, or robots had feelings? And Inside Out uses the same question setup for its premise, but it doesn't work the same. What if feelings had feelings? Well, let me tell you, the feelings that these feelings feel are gonna make you feel some serious feelings. This is a wonderful and poignant movie about growing up and parent-child relationships, and has some incredibly cool world building to boot. Coming in at number 15, The Martian. Here we've got another sci-fi movie featuring a scientist as the lead character. I think I'm starting to see another pattern emerge here with the kinds of movies I like. Space-based movies and even space rescue mission stories are certainly nothing new, but this film tackles the subject matter in an incredibly original way. The story is very compelling, but it's Matt Damon's performance that truly elevates this movie to greatness. He's incredibly believable as the astronaut who gets left behind and contributes this sort of comedic likability to the role that makes you really want to root for his character. Coming in at number 14, Ex Machina. This is the second Alex Garland film to make this top half of the list, and is another sci-fi movie that presents not only an interesting story and mystery, but also has a lot to say about how we use technology. It's a phenomenally crafted movie, and really focuses on this juxtaposition between organic and synthetic. It's something you can appreciate on a super surface level by just looking at the human and robot characters, but this is a movie that has so much subtext and so many underlying themes that you can really sink your teeth into it if you want. Coming in at number 13, Zootopia. Considering the fact that I went to college for zoology, this is just about the most perfect movie for me. The story's great, blending elements of police procedurals, buddy cop movies, and mystery films, all within the animation style. The characters are fantastic, and I know I've mentioned the world building for a lot of these movies, but it's really excellent here. For a movie like this, it actually does a pretty good job when it comes to accurately portraying animal behavior. Obviously, animals don't talk or live in cities together, but some of the specific aspects of the behavior of certain species and ecological concepts like biomes are tackled in very clever and fun ways here. Coming in at number 12, 1917. This film is the newest movie to make it onto the list, receiving its initial limited release a single week before the close of the decade, but it certainly earns its spot on the list. This movie is an experience. It's a simple yet incredibly compelling and immersive story, and with its simulated single-take filming and editing style, it's also a technical feat. The film is made infinitely more tense as a result, and I have to say, this is already one of my favorite war movies of all time. It'll be remembered for its cinematography, but the story and performances are equally deserving of praise and attention. Coming in at number 11, Us. I know it might seem like I've got a little bit of recency bias here with another 2019 movie, but what can I say? 2019 was an excellent year for film. This movie sees the second inclusion of Jordan Peele on this list, and much like his first film, Get Out, this one is able to balance an incredibly interesting horror story with its underlying social commentary. While Us is more of a classic horror movie than Get Out was, it still has an extremely original plot at its core, and is certainly very creepy at times. This is one of the few films that I saw more than once in the theater during 2019, and it's one that I honestly still can't get enough of. Coming in at number 10, The Shape of Water. You know how sometimes you can just watch a movie, even for the very first time, and love everything about it? How sometimes you just vibe with a movie and feel a strong connection to it? Well, The Shape of Water is one of those movies for me. I love Guillermo del Toro. I think he makes such unique and interesting films. They're always so meticulously crafted and have fantastical elements to them which shockingly and brutally get disrupted by the harshness of reality. This film really has it all. Amazing production design, superb cinematography, excellent performances, and a surprisingly relatable and emotional story embedded within Del Toro's signature horror-tinged fantasy subgenre. Coming in at number 9, Parasite. Speaking of meticulously crafted, genre-defying films, we've got my favorite movie of 2019. The hype for this one was absolutely insane, but even with my really high expectations, this movie still managed to blow me away. The film starts as one thing, but ends as something entirely different, managing to not be jarring in its transition. It's a very darkly comedic mystery that takes its inspiration from the likes of Agatha Christie and Alfred Hitchcock, but presents its story in a way that's wholly original and unexpected. Coming in at number 8, Whiplash. The world of competitive jazz drumming might not sound like an obvious or particularly interesting focus for a movie, but Whiplash is an utterly gripping and visceral experience. It's a draining movie, not because anything particularly sad or devastating happens, because of the journey it takes you on. Without realizing it, you sit on the edge of your seat. You hold your breath and all of your muscles tense up, so even though the only thing you were doing was sitting down and watching a movie, you feel physically and mentally exhausted by the end. It's a very interesting story about music, motivation, drive, and teaching pedagogy, elevated by the electric performances of both J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller. Coming in at number 7, Koko. Yes, yet another Pixar movie has made this list, but unlike all the others I've mentioned so far, I was actually really excited for this one when it was first announced, and it was even better than I had anticipated. Pixar's films have always had strong emotional cores that truly drive the film, much more than a cool story or set of characters ever could do on its own. And Koko is one of the studio's finest examples of that. It's equal parts uplifting and heart-wrenching, and this is one of only 3 Pixar movies that has ever made me tear up in the theater. The story's wonderful, and I love seeing the care that the filmmakers put into showcasing and honoring Mexican culture. Coming in at number 6, Lucy. So I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there going, what? This might be one of the biggest upsets on this list, but I absolutely adore this movie. High concept sci-fi, remember? This is one of those movies that I could spend a lot of time talking about the individual things in it that I like. The premise, Scarlett Johansson's performance, the visual style and editing, the questions that it raises. But even if I went into detail on each of those points, I don't think it would satisfactorily explain to you why I like this movie as much as I do. So to make it simple, the movie just struck the right chord with me. I loved it the first time I saw it in the theater, and I've loved it just as much, if not more, every time I've rewatched it since. Coming in at number 5, Wonder Woman. This list has seen the inclusion of a few superhero movies, mostly from the MCU, but my favorite of the decade is actually from the DCEU. To be honest, I didn't ever really think that much about Wonder Woman before. I didn't dislike the character, but I also didn't really have any interest in her either. But her very brief appearance in Batman v Superman and her amazing little intro riff certainly piqued my interest. And then this movie was released, and it was absolutely amazing. I loved the period piece aspect of this film, and visually, it was very distinctive from the other DC movies. Plus, it had a really good story, a great blend of tones, and exhilarating action sequences. I love Gal Gadot as this character, and I'm really looking forward to Wonder Woman 1984 this year. Coming in at number 4, Limitless. So much like Lucy, I have a feeling that this might be a bit of a controversial pick. But honestly, just like with Lucy, this movie just has the perfect combination of elements for me. High concept sci-fi with a really cool premise? Check. Interesting story? Check. Fun, nonsensical pseudoscience? Check. Unique visual style and editing? Check. Excellent performance by an actor I really like? Check. Again, I don't know if I could explain it in a way that would suddenly make it make sense to you, but I just love this movie and have a great time watching it no matter how many times I've seen it. Coming in at number 3, Shutter Island. This is one of those movies that I could talk about for hours, especially if I was talking spoilers. Much like all the other films that are this high up on the list, this movie has everything I love in a film. An amazing layered plot that begs for rewatches, realistic and believable characters, wonderful performances, and just a great look and feel to it. At first glance and first watch, this movie plays out like a really interesting mystery thriller. But with each subsequent rewatch, it becomes something much more psychological. You see new levels of the film that you never knew existed. New clues reveal themselves to you, and things that used to seem strange now make perfect sense. This probably isn't a common opinion, but Shutter Island is definitely my favorite Scorsese film. Coming in at number 2, Toy Story 3. That's right, not only is this the 4th Pixar movie to make this list, but it's also the 2nd Toy Story movie to do so. For me, Toy Story 3 is peak emotional Pixar. As I said before, Toy Story is a really important franchise for me. I literally grew up with these movies, and so as a result, I grew up with Andy. We hit the same turning points in our lives at just about the same time, so I've always felt a really strong connection to the franchise's themes of growing up, and Toy Story 3 is the culmination of that thematic arc. It's an absolutely stellar film, and I'm not ashamed to admit that it makes me cry every single time I watch it. The only movie that does that to me. So that means my number one movie of the 2010s is Inception. Christopher Nolan kicked off the decade with an absolute masterpiece of a film. This is not only my favorite movie of the decade, but also one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a high-concept sci-fi movie, big surprise, I know, and it's just got everything you could ever want in a film. Seriously, every aspect of a movie I could ever think to mention is outstanding here. The story and premise, the characters, the script, the performances, the cinematography, the score, the casting, all of it. This movie is one of the very rare films that I would consider to be perfect. Alright, so there you have it, part 2 of my top 50 movies of the 2010s. Since there were so many movies in this list, I thought it would be interesting to see a breakdown of some of the stats, so I wanted to share some of those numbers with you. This list contains movies from all 10 years of the decade, with 2017 leading the pack with a whopping 10 movies, and 2013 bringing up the rear with only one film. There was a pretty good mix of genres, with dramas taking the lead, but that's to be expected given the broadness of the genre. Science fiction came in second with 12 movies, 7 of which I would consider to be high-concept sci-fi. Only 4 superhero movies made the cut, and there were 6 animated films, 4 from Pixar and 2 from Disney. Toy Story, Mission Impossible, and the MCU were all tied as the most frequently included franchises, with 2 films apiece. There was also a 3-way tie for the most included director, with Jordan Peele, Alex Garland, and Matthew Vaughn each having 2 movies on the list. Unfortunately, Kathryn Bigelow and Patty Jenkins were the only 2 female directors to have movies that made the cut. There were 3 Best Picture winners and another 13 films that were nominated for Best Picture, including this year's nominees. Octavia Spencer is the actress that makes the most appearances with 4 films, but Emily Blunt and Scarlett Johansson are tied for second with 3 apiece. And as far as the guys go, there's actually a 5-way tie with Tom Cruise, Jeremy Renner, Chris Pratt, Anthony Mackie, and Mark Strong all making 3 appearances. Remember, I've already reviewed some of these movies, so you can check those videos out if you want some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. And if you're interested in buying any of these movies, I do have affiliate links to all of them in the description below. I do get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what your top 10 movies of the decade were, so be sure to let me know in the comments below. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this top list, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.